Welcome everybody. Just so everyone is aware, this meeting will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube page in the coming weeks, maybe about a month or so. Thank you for joining. I think this is about a year since we started the Social Justice Club. And last year we also talked about today's issue to some degree. We'll be discussing the topic of hate crimes and we'll be exploring the Southern Poverty Law Center's toolkit entitled 10 Ways to Fight Hate, a community resource guide. The Southern Poverty Law Center is an American 501 nonprofit legal advocacy organization, and they specialize in civil rights and public interest litigation. Manor will be linking the article, and I think she already did, as well as the discussion questions in the chat. And you can open the chat by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. And as librarians, we are information specialists here to simply bring you information and not persuade you of anything. Please be respectful of others. In addition, I want to welcome all perspectives and would like everyone to contribute if they are comfortable doing so. So let's get started. So like I said, it's 10 ways to fight hate, not fight crime, but they are hate crimes. So we're going to start off with the first question was, of the 10 principles in the guide, which one spoke to you the most and why?
I think it was hard to pick one. I think there was something on each one that was kind of like, oh, that's a really good point. That's really interesting. That maybe you think, oh, well, I already do this. And then you're reading it and you're like, oh, I'm not doing this. So it kind of works as maybe to like reset your perspective. So I really appreciated that.
I think that the one that spoke to me most is the one about creating an alternative. Yes, sometimes you think that the best way to fight hate is to confront them, but actually, from what we read, it's saying the opposite. So even though you might feel triggered and maybe you could try to be impulsive, as to go and speak against it. I think it takes more courage to just find an alternative, and maybe that might work better.
I was just going to say for me, it was say something, apathy, it hurts the victim as much, it hurts that the person doing it will think it's okay to do it, but also that it will hurt the victim.
I was going to say number 4, which is kind of similar to what you just said, the whole speaking up thing. I think that's probably the most important. And all of it kind of goes together. I think, of course, it's all connected, but speaking up, I think, is the easiest. It's the most actionable thing you could do in the moment. Whether, your hands are shaking and your palms are sweaty and your heart is beating really fast because you're part of this situation that, nobody really wants to be in. But if you have that support or somebody has your support in a situation like that, I think it goes a really long way. And whether it's a hate crime or a microaggression, all of it still hurts the same. So I think being able to call it out when it happens in the moment. And I know a lot of times it's hard to do it in the moment, but even if you end up after the fact realizing, how could I have approached that situation better, could end up being really beneficial.
Yeah, you all made really great points. And I agree with Valerie. It was hard to pick one, but something she did mention was kind of looking at yourself, and that was number 10, dig deeper. So it says look inside yourself for biases and stereotypes, and they give you some things. It begins with me. It says, how wide is my circle of friends, and how diverse are the people who visit my home? Do I take the time to listen and learn from other people's experiences, especially people with whom I might initially disagree? And I think that is, for me, the most important thing, because I can stand up here on a high pedestal and say, I'm the most unbiased person, most anti-racist person here. But in saying that, you're denying any biases you do have, because we all inherently have those. We all have these stereotypes in our head. And it's fine to have those, but you have to acknowledge that you have those first and foremost, and then you have to work to do better. And I really think that's where people should start. They should look at themselves and see how they can do better. And that way they can be an actual practicing good ally to others. I'll move on to the next question, but we can always go back to the other one too. But so there's a quote in there that says, in the face of hatred, apathy will be interpreted as acceptance by the perpetrators. And that's what you were saying, Joe, as well as Manor. How do we convince others who want to speak up but are afraid to act? What are some actual steps we can take to make a change and lead a movement? So you can talk about things you read about in this article, or you can talk about based on personal experiences or other things you've read or seen. But what do you think would be the most effective way to get people to actually put action behind their words?
I think it all goes back to speaking up, like you've said before, because that's just the simple thing to do. And it starts with you, and then you can probably influence others.
I think setting an example can be really important. So, like during the George Floyd protests, I try and keep my social media pretty, like, I don't know, neutral, but I really felt like I have to post on there, and put myself out there to say Black Lives Matter. And it was a little difficult to do that since I hadn't really, put that out there before. And I got a couple comments that were like, "Oh, all lives matter," but I had more people step up, and like I was still trying to figure out how do I respond to people who, and more people who stepped up and supported the message, and so they supported me, and so then I know who I can support, and you can kind of build your circle of people that will be there for you, and then you also know who you might need to reach out to try and you know change their opinion.
I think it also has to do with like one of the principles to stay engaged. I mean, if you stay engaged, you continue the conversation or start the conversation, you're able to hear more perspectives or to find others that share your beliefs. And maybe as a group, you can do more or think about a way to solve a problem or help others.
I think the staying engaged also ties into educating yourself. I think that's a really big one that goes hand in hand with each other, because the more you expose yourself to current events and even just history itself, the more you'll realize the nuances of those ideas and how they still are perpetuated today. Even something as simple as like sharing an Instagram post or something. And that's usually my way of educating myself and educating other people in an indirect kind of way. So, and I've had some friends be like, no, like your Instagram story is literally my favorite history class, because like I haven't learned any of this before, and you sharing this is actually really helpful. So that's why I do it. And so it's kind of a two birds, one stone situation. So everybody kind of benefits from it. I haven't had anybody who didn't appreciate the information that I share. I think a lot of the people that I'm friends with and follow on social media are all very like-minded in that sense. So that's kind of comforting to know.
Well, I know I have gotten a lot of new accounts that I follow by following Monor. And so then I will share it. And I have a lot of people on my social media that I follow or I'm friends with through like other obligations or organizations that I'm a member of. So I know that I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but because we have that association, we have that connection. And so if I'm then seeing from Monor and I'm resharing it, they're going to see it from me. So it's a chain. So you don't know what one action, who all it could impact or reach.
And I think that also, if you don't know what the others or those that have different opinions are thinking or believing, how can you make changes or at least come up with ideas of how to in a way, try to change the way they think.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to change everyone's mind or change their perspective. However, I think it's important if you do have the time, if both of you have the time, to have an open conversation about why you feel a certain way, why you believe a certain thing that you may butt heads about. And I think having that open dialogue does a lot to see each other as humans, as individuals, and not just as someone from a different group, someone that's been othered. And I think it's important when you're talking to people who you may view as closed-minded to understand that they're going to make mistakes. You're also going to make mistakes. And the biggest thing to come out of it is a greater understanding and admittance that you might be wrong in a certain perspective. Um, I think that's how people are able to grow, but they have to have that willingness to start with. And if they really are, let's say, a true friend to you, they will listen and hopefully they will try to grow from that. And vice versa. I mean, maybe there's something that you don't know about them. You know, you're going to make a mistake too. I think that's a big part of allyship, is acknowledging that there will be mistakes, but then realizing and apologizing and trying to do better next time.
I'm kind of taking it all in right now. I left Facebook because of a lot of that. In-laws and family members, and I was looking at people in a different way, and I wound up leaving the platform because of it. So I only have Twitter now. I do have Instagram, but I don't really go on there. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of just taking it in right now.
Yeah, thank you. It's difficult because you do have to balance your mental health with, trying to be an activist or just trying to, tell people where you're coming from. But yeah, I think it's important to do some self-care too. So getting away from certain social media sites can definitely help, and having real human interaction in person, I think, is a lot better, because people are pretty unfiltered online, and I don't think a lot of these people would say these things in person. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
I wound up using my activism in different ways, volunteering for campaigns, especially during 2020 and during the runoff. I did more of that for the causes that I believe in, which is, combating hate and racism.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that is definitely one of the important points here, is combating hate crimes, and hate is to show up, to be present at these things and show your support. Just showing up is a huge deal.
And I think that's also why a lot of us wanted to help out with this social justice club too, because this topic or this idea is very important to all of us. And we wanted to help do our part in trying to sort of create those spaces for those conversations, whether they are the tough kind or very easy. And even if we don't get a lot of people involved, just having just the one or two people here can still make a really big difference. And I think that it's easier to have those conversations in person sometimes, because tone gets lost on the internet very quickly too. So it's hard to really understand if you're not, especially if people don't use tone indicators, then people might not really know what you mean and what your intention is. So I think having them in person and having them, especially with people that you may trust too, can help you like build a better foundation about how to proceed in your activism and your allyship. So
Something else I feel is important to point out, last year we talked about the Atlanta fall shootings and how that affected the Asian American community. I was reading an article from Asian Americans Advancing Justice. They had put out a statement in regards to the 1-year anniversary of the shootings. And something that stood out to me was this. It says, grappling with the truth also means confronting anti-Blackness in our Asian American communities. We cannot allow the tragedy of the shootings in Atlanta to justify policies that expand law enforcement and its disproportionate impacts on Black communities. Rather, alongside our Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Arab, and Pacific Islander allies, we are inspired to reimagine what justice, healing, love, and hope can look like in our communities. And so, even if you are part of a marginalized community, you have to look beyond your own community and see that there are others that are struggling to see that there are others that are in need of help and are going through similar things, if not worse things than your own group. And I think being allies in that respect is something that needs to be included in these talks as well. It's not just a matter of Black or white. It's like you were saying, Manor, the nuances of everything. There's so many aspects to look at, and educating yourself is what is very important.
Intersectionality. That's it. Yes, exactly. Intersectionality is really important. And you can care about multiple things at one time, and oftentimes they do overlap with each other, which is why when there are causes like this, or these types of instances happening in the news, doesn't mean we're just going to throw away the one thing that we were focusing on like 5 minutes ago. Now we're on this thing. We can care about both things at the same time. We can care about all the things at one time. And I think that the concept of intersectionality can get overlooked because it feels like we have to just care about one thing at one time, and that's just not how that works. So that's definitely an important concept.
And also it's one of the 10 ways. I mean, joining forces, more of us might make more changes or help out spreading the word.
Something else important to note, if you do experience a hate crime, or if someone you know, or if you just happen to witness a hate crime, Georgia does have a hate crime bill that was signed into law in 2020 by Governor Brian Kemp. We were the 47th state to pass a hate crime bill, which is pretty late in the game. And it was in reaction to the Ahmaud Arbery and Rayshard Brooks murders in Georgia, which better late than never. We do have that. And I will tell you, our Solicitor General, Brian Whiteside, every opportunity he gets, he wants everyone to know that they will prosecute hate crimes in this county. So he wants everyone to be reassured that that is something they take very seriously. You know, whether or not the judge ultimately enacts it is another thing, but they will do everything in their power to acknowledge hate crimes and give added time to certain criminal offenses. So that's something else the article talked about. What's a hate crime versus a bias incident? And a crime does have to occur in addition to the bias. So again, hopefully there's some hope, at least in our county, that people will be looked out for. Since we have such a diverse county, I feel like it's bound to happen. And I just hope that people feel protected.
Like you said, it's better late than never. It's disappointing, but not surprising that it has to take this long for something like this, for a bill like this to get passed. And it has to take somebody or multiple people losing their lives to finally be like, oh, this is a bad thing. We should make sure this doesn't happen to other people. Even though the bill has been passed, doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. But it is very comforting to know that our Solicitor General is going to take this very seriously. And that makes sense since we did meet him at the 316 memorial. So that is a little bit of a comfort to know that. It's just also the justice system that we can't really be sure of how that will help play out those cases when they do get prosecuted.
Exactly. You just have to hope that in the end it will actually happen. But at least there's a foundation there for it to happen. But hopefully we wouldn't have to deal with that. Hopefully it wouldn't have to come to that. But the reality of it is it happens every day all around our country. And it goes underreported. All sorts of hate crimes go underreported. And, people are afraid to speak out. They don't know, what's going to happen if they do speak out.
And I think having social media has also been such a game changer for all of this because, anything can get posted in like a second because of the fact that we have these tiny devices that are a part of us and we like can't let go of them. So having those also helps tremendously, even like especially in George Floyd's case, it had that bystander not been recording, I feel like the conversation would have gone very differently. Or anything that happens, everyone has their cameras out because everyone's ready to just like, expose people, whether it's for good or bad reasons. But having social media is such a powerful tool, but it's also a dangerous tool too, because of the spread of misinformation and perpetuating hate.
Have you seen too that some police, I guess this has been prevalent out in California or Los Angeles, police deliberately will play like Disney music so that it can't be posted to social media because of copyright
I
infringement?
think that sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah, I think I did hear about that.
I was just reading about that yesterday, which is horrible. The law needs to catch up with that police aren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. I did hear about that, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And like you said, the law has to catch up in a lot of ways, and that is one of them. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. It really is.
I was just going to say the fact that they're doing that shows that they're trying to hide something.
I was just going to say the same thing, that knowing that you have this sort of quote unquote loophole and you're going to use it just makes you seem more guilty.
Right.
Even in situations where someone is about to lose their life and they turn off their body cams, all of a sudden it's not working, even though it was working just fine 10 seconds ago. And I was
Right.
I think I was actually talking to Valerie about it actually. And we were discussing about how you shouldn't be able to just manually turn it off like right there on your person.
Right.
There should be some way to like control it from, a central location or something like that. And even when they do end up turning off their own cams, and it does clearly, in a lot of people's opinions, will make them look guilty, it's still not seen that way. You lose either way. So it's like, that's also really unfortunate too, that nothing is perfect and there's no such thing as perfection, but we could try to get kind of close, especially in really important matters like this where people's lives are at stake.
If you enjoyed today's session, please join us again on Thursday, June 16th at 6:30 p.m. And we'll be discussing LGBTQIA+ issues. Registration is required, and you can sign up by going to www.gwinnettpl.org and clicking on the calendar link for June 16th, or by calling our customer contact center at 770-978-5154, and the link will be up soon. Thank you for joining us.